Have you ever wondered what would happen if the smallest voice in the room was the one chosen to change history? What if the prayers you whisper in your darkest moments could spark a revolution of hope? And have you ever asked yourself, how far would you go? Or what would you give up for a dream you believe was meant for something greater than yourself? Some of the greatest heroes in history never wore a crown, never led an army, and never even thought of themselves as heroes at all. Tonight, we're stepping into a world where faith moves mountains, and the quiet courage of a mother plants the seeds for a nation's destiny. This isn't just an ancient legend, it's a living story, full of heartbreak, sacrifice, second chances, and the kind of miracles that can happen even in the most unlikely places. Why do some lives seem so small at first, but end up changing everything? Why does true greatness almost always come in unexpected ways? Let's find out together. Come with me as we journey into the remarkable story of Samuel, the prophet who began as an answered prayer and became a light that refused to go out. Have you ever found yourself praying for something with all your heart, but the silence was so thick it felt like your prayers bounced right back? What do you do when hope seems impossible and all you have left is a whisper? Let me take you back to a world that feels surprisingly familiar, a world where dreams don't always come true right away, and pain has a way of echoing in empty hallways. This is the story of Hannah, a woman whose longing cut deeper than most of us could ever imagine. Picture this. Thousands of years ago, in a small, sun-baked village, lived Hannah, a wife, a daughter, a believer, but there was something missing in her life. Something so important that her identity in the eyes of her community seemed to hang on it. A child. In those ancient times, a woman's worth was often measured by the children she brought into the world. Infertility wasn't just a private pain, it was public shame. Imagine Hannah walking to the temple year after year, head held high while her heart felt like it was breaking. She was misunderstood by her family, mocked by others, and even questioned by her priest. But every time she came back, she poured out her heart, her hope, her raw pain to a God she couldn't see, but still believed in. Have you ever felt like Hannah? Have you ever wanted something so badly that you couldn't sleep at night, or so deeply that it felt like your whole world was on pause? That's why this story is timeless, because whether you're an ancient Israelite or a single parent in modern-day America, there are moments when hope seems like the bravest thing you can hold on to. Now let's get even more real for a moment. If you've ever prayed for a miracle, you know it isn't always pretty. It's messy, it's desperate, and sometimes it's lonely. But sometimes hope grows best in the soil of heartbreak. Let me tell you about a mom I once met at a community center in Ohio. Her son was struggling, really struggling. Addiction had him in its grip, and every day felt like a new kind of loss. She tried everything: tough love, gentle words, family therapy, interventions, but nothing changed until she started showing up every Sunday at a small neighborhood church. She prayed, not just once, not just for a week, but for years. When people told her to move on, she kept showing up. When her friends said, "He'll never change," she whispered, "But maybe he will." It wasn't instant. There was relapse, disappointment, days she felt foolish for hoping, but eventually her son got clean. And then he did something she never expected. He turned around and started helping others who were fighting the same battle. That's the Hannah story. Not just because a prayer was answered, but because hope outlasted heartbreak. You see, faith isn't the absence of struggle. It's showing up again and again, even when the answer isn't clear. It's having the courage to believe that what you long for could still happen, even when everyone around you has given up. What makes Hannah's story so powerful isn't just that she eventually held a child in her arms. It's that she believed before she saw the miracle. She believed when the world told her to give up. And maybe, just maybe, the real miracle wasn't the answer. It was her willingness to keep asking. So what's the lesson here for all of us? If you're facing a closed door, if you're living with an unanswered prayer, or just waiting for something to change, don't underestimate the power of hope. Hope has a way of quietly changing the future, one prayer, one act of faith at a time. And as we move forward, remember, Hannah's story doesn't end with her miracle. Her choice to give, to trust, and to let go opened a path for something much greater than just her own happiness. Are you ready to see how one act of faith can ripple through generations? Let's journey deeper and discover what happened when Hannah placed her precious hope into hands greater than her own. Have you ever asked yourself, what does it truly mean to love someone enough to let them go? Would you be willing to give up the person you love most if it meant they could become who they were meant to be? And how far would you go to keep a promise, especially when it breaks your own heart? This part of Hannah's story is not just powerful, it's almost unbelievable. Imagine finally having the one thing you prayed for your whole life, only to choose to give it away. That's exactly what Hannah did. She kept her promise to God, even when every mother's instinct must have begged her to hold Samuel close. Year after year, she had come to the temple with empty arms, pleading for a child. Now, her prayers answered, she holds her miracle, a baby boy named Samuel, whose very name means God has heard. But Hannah's story isn't just about receiving, it's about releasing. When Samuel was still a small child, maybe just old enough to run to her arms, Hannah did something most parents today can barely imagine. She brought him to the temple, handed him to the priest Eli, and entrusted his life to God's greater plan. She knew that Samuel was born for a bigger purpose, a calling beyond her own dreams. It wasn't that she loved him any less, it's that she loved him enough to put his destiny above her own desires. Let's pause for a moment and bring this ancient decision into our world today. How many American parents know the ache of watching their child leave home for the first time? Whether it's sending a son or daughter off to college across the country, standing at the gates as they join the military, or waving goodbye as they choose a path different from the one you imagined. Letting go is never easy. I remember a friend, Michelle, whose oldest daughter, Emily, was accepted into a medical program in another state. Michelle had always been the kind of mom who tucked Emily in every night, packed her lunches, and knew every detail of her daily life. The day Emily drove away was both her proudest and hardest day. Michelle described the house as so quiet, it almost echoed. She said she felt a mix of pride, fear, and an odd sense of emptiness. But she knew that her love was in letting Emily go, in trusting that the world needed her daughter's gifts. Another dad I once met at a small-town coffee shop shared how his only son joined the Marines. There was a lump in his throat as he talked about how he'd always dreamed of passing down the family business, but his son felt called to serve. He confessed, letting him go was the hardest thing I ever did, but watching him become the man he's meant to be, that's love too. Stories like these happen every day. The ache of letting go is part of every parent's journey. And yet, as Hannah showed us so long ago, sometimes true love means giving up our grip so someone else can grow. Here's the thing, Hannah's sacrifice didn't just change Samuel's life. It created a foundation for everything that was to come. Samuel went on to become one of the most influential leaders in Israel's history. A prophet, a judge, a voice that would echo for generations. And all of that began with a mother's open hands. Sometimes I wonder how many destinies have been unlocked by parents who chose faith over fear, who dared to trust that their children were made for something beyond their own embrace. You see, we all want to protect the people we love. We want to hold them close, keep them safe from the world. But there are moments when the most loving thing we can do is step back and let them chase their own calling, even when it's not the path we would have chosen. True love is never about possession. It's about purpose. It's about seeing the gifts in someone you cherish and believing that the world needs those gifts, maybe even more than you do. If you're a parent, or if you've ever had to let go of a dream or a loved one, remember, your sacrifice can lay the groundwork for someone else's greatness. That's the kind of love that changes not just a life, but the world. And as we turn the page in Hannah and Samuel's story, ask yourself, what doors might open if we dared to give our best gifts away? What new beginnings might follow our acts of faith? Let's follow Samuel's journey and discover how his mother's courage paved the way for a destiny far greater than anyone could have imagined. What would you do if everything around you seemed broken, but you still had the chance to choose what's right? How do you hold on to your values when the people in power keep letting you down? And is it possible to rise above a troubled environment, even when you feel alone in your convictions? This was the world Samuel faced as he grew up in the temple. Samuel wasn't raised in a perfect home. He wasn't surrounded by flawless role models. In fact, the very place he called home, the temple itself, was run by Eli, a high priest whose own sons Hophni and Phinehas had become the poster children for corruption. They abused their positions, took advantage of others, and cared more about their own pleasure than about justice, truth, or the people they were supposed to serve. Can you imagine being a kid trying to do the right thing when everyone around you is choosing the easy way out? That's exactly what Samuel lived through. But here's the twist. Samuel made a different choice. He decided that his future wouldn't be defined by the failures of those around him. He chose integrity, even when it would have been easier to just go along. He learned that you can't always pick your circumstances, but you can always pick your response. And that is a lesson as true today as it was thousands of years ago. Let's bring this ancient wisdom into the present. In neighborhoods all across America, there are young people growing up in environments filled with obstacles, poverty, violence, addiction, and broken trust. The statistics can be overwhelming, but stories of hope shine through the darkness. Let me share one that still inspires me. A young African-American man I met in Chicago grew up in a neighborhood where gangs and drugs were a part of daily life. Most people expected him to follow the same path as so many before him. But in middle school, a teacher saw something special in him, a spark, a drive. She mentored him, challenged him, believed in him. He worked hard, got his grades up, and against all odds, earned a scholarship to college. He became the first in his family to graduate, went on to law school, and now spends his days serving his old community as an attorney, advocating for young people just like himself. He could have let his environment define him. He could have pointed fingers, blamed the system, and given in. But he didn't. He chose his own story. This is the heart of Samuel's legacy. We all face moments when it would be easy to blame our circumstances for our choices. It's tempting to say, I am the way I am because of where I came from. Or, it's not my fault. Look at what I've been given. But history and real life both show us that greatness is born not in comfort, but in resistance. The mistake we often make is thinking our environment is our destiny. But the truth is, every day, we have the chance to choose differently. You don't have to repeat the patterns you've seen. You don't have to carry on the mistakes of those who came before you. Samuel's story reminds us that what matters most is not the world around you, but the decisions you make in your own heart. He chose faith over fear, integrity over compromise, and purpose over convenience. And because of that, his life became a beacon for others, showing that it's not where you start, but how you choose to live that counts. If you're in a tough spot, if you've ever felt weighed down by your past or the expectations of others, remember, you have the power to write your own story. You can be the change even when no one else is. And maybe, just maybe, your decision to stand for what's right could light the way for someone else. As we continue with Samuel's journey, let's explore what happens when a single honest heart is ready to listen, and how one moment of courage can change everything. Have you ever been woken up in the middle of the night, not by noise, but by a feeling? Has your heart ever whispered something so persistent it refused to let you rest, even when the world was silent? What if the turning point of your life arrived when you least expected it? And it started as nothing more than a gentle nudge in the dark. Let's step into one of the most mysterious and unforgettable moments in the story of Samuel. Samuel was just a boy, lying in the quiet shadows of the temple, surrounded by the fading embers of a broken priesthood. It was late. The world was asleep. But in that stillness, a voice called his name, Samuel. At first, he thought it was Eli, the old priest he'd grown up with. Samuel ran to him, eager and a bit confused. "Here I am. Did you call me?" But Eli said no. So Samuel went back to bed. And then it happened again and again. 3 times Samuel heard his name in the darkness. 3 times he responded, not with indifference or fear, but with openness, ready to serve. Finally, Eli realized something holy was happening. He told Samuel, "If you hear the voice again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And just like that, Samuel opened his heart to a calling that would change not only his life, but the destiny of an entire nation. Here's why this moment still matters to us today. In the ancient world, hearing God's voice was rare, especially for a child. But the lesson isn't just about the miracle, it's about the posture of listening. It's about being ready to answer, even when you don't know what's coming next. Now, let's bring this ancient story into our modern lives. We may not hear a voice in the night, but each of us at some point feels a pull, a whisper from deep within. Sometimes it's a sense that we're meant to do more. Sometimes it's an idea we can't shake. Sometimes it's a restlessness or a gentle push toward a new chapter. In today's world, the call can look like a new career, a change in relationships, or the urge to step out of your comfort zone for something you believe in. Think about the last few years. How many people, maybe even you, felt a powerful nudge to change direction during the chaos of the pandemic? A neighbor who had worked decades in finance suddenly felt compelled to become a nurse. A friend who'd always played it safe finally started that nonprofit because the need in their community was too big to ignore. A teacher who lost her job found herself building an online classroom for kids who'd been left behind. These aren't just stories. They're examples of what can happen when we dare to listen and dare to respond. One woman I know had a steady job in hospitality. When COVID hit, everything stopped. At first, she was scared, but in the silence, she began to feel a new kind of calling, an urge to help others who were struggling even more than she was. She volunteered at food banks, then went back to school to become a social worker. It wasn't easy, but today, she wakes up with a sense of purpose she never had before. Her willingness to listen to the call in the night didn't just change her life, it changed the lives of hundreds in her city. That's what Samuel's story is all about. It's about the courage to say, "Speak, I'm listening," even when you don't know what the answer will mean. Sometimes the hardest part isn't hearing the call, it's having the guts to answer. It's trusting that there's a reason for that restless feeling in your chest. It's believing that even a single life, open and willing, can make a difference. So what's the lesson here? Don't ignore that whisper. Be willing to tune out the noise, to quiet your doubts, and to pay attention to what your heart is telling you. You never know. Your willingness to listen could be the start of a journey you never imagined. And remember, even Samuel needed a guide. Sometimes it takes a wise friend, mentor, or even a moment of quiet prayer to help us recognize what's truly calling us. So as we continue the journey, let's see how Samuel's courage to answer changed the future for his people, and ask ourselves, what call might be waiting for us in the quiet moments of our own lives? Let's move forward and see what happens when a calling becomes a mission, and when one brave yes echoes for generations. What happens when the people in charge turn a blind eye to what's wrong until it's too late to make things right? How much damage can really be done when a leader ignores the small cracks, thinking they'll never become chasms? And what's the cost, not just for them, but for everyone around them? In the story of Samuel, these aren't just rhetorical questions. They're the painful reality of the house of Eli. Eli was high priest, the spiritual leader of Israel. But leadership, as we're about to see, is more than just a title. It's a responsibility. And when that responsibility is neglected, the fallout can be devastating. Let's revisit the temple for a moment. Samuel, still a boy, is growing up under the roof of Eli, but Eli has a problem. Two problems, really. His sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were supposed to be priests, set apart to serve God and the community. But instead, they abused their power. They stole from the offerings. They disrespected the women who came to worship. They treated what was holy as if it meant nothing at all. You'd think, as their father and their boss, Eli would step in and set things right, but he didn't. He warned them, but never enforced consequences. He saw the wrong, but looked the other way. Now, this wasn't just a private family issue. This was a public scandal. The people lost respect for the priesthood. They doubted the integrity of their leaders. And slowly, faith in the entire community began to crumble. If you think this is just an ancient story, think again. We see the same pattern play out today in families, in businesses, in churches, in politics. A manager notices a team member bending the rules but decides it's not a big deal. A parent shrugs off a child's repeated dishonesty, hoping it'll go away on its own. A leader in a community group hears whispers about misbehavior but avoids confrontation because it feels uncomfortable. I once knew a small business owner who discovered that one of his longtime employees was skimming money from the cash register. He felt paralyzed. He'd known this person for years. He hoped the problem would fix itself, but it didn't. Eventually, the loss added up. Trust was shattered, not just between employer and employee, but among the entire staff. The business struggled to recover. The lesson: problems rarely fix themselves. Looking away doesn't make wrongs right, it makes them worse. Here's the truth: the small things we ignore often become the big things that break us. As leaders, whether of a family, a business, a classroom, or a nation, our silence can be just as harmful as any action. Eli's reluctance to discipline his sons didn't just affect his family. It brought pain and chaos to the entire community. The priesthood lost its moral center. The people lost faith in those meant to guide them. Eventually, disaster struck: the loss of the ark, the deaths of Eli's sons, and even Eli himself. A whole nation suffered because one leader refused to act. What's the deeper lesson here? Power without the anchor of ethics always drifts toward disaster. Authority means nothing if it's not exercised with courage and principle. Real love, real leadership means facing uncomfortable truths, having hard conversations, and setting boundaries, even when it's painful. It's not enough to simply notice what's wrong. We have to be willing to stand up and do something about it. So if you're in a position of influence, even just in your home, don't underestimate the ripple effect of your choices. Hold tight to your values and don't let the small things slide, because if you do, the consequences might reach much further than you ever imagined. And as we move forward, let's see how the failure of one generation created the stage for a new kind of leader. Let's discover what happens when someone finally chooses to break the cycle and lead with conviction, no matter the cost. Have you ever believed that a lucky charm, a favorite ritual, or a treasured object could protect you from the hardest moments in life? Have you ever put your faith in something, hoping it would bring success or safety, only to realize you'd lost sight of what really matters? What if the very thing you cling to for comfort is what's holding you back from true strength? Let's journey into one of the most dramatic and painful moments in Israel's story. After years of ignoring warning signs, after leaders turned a blind eye to corruption, the people of Israel found themselves at war. Fearful and desperate, they reached for what they thought was their secret weapon: the Ark of the Covenant. This was no ordinary artifact. It was the holiest symbol in Israel, a golden chest that represented the presence and promises of God Himself. For generations, the Ark had gone before them in battle. But something was different this time. Instead of turning to God in trust and humility, the Israelites began to treat the Ark like a magical relic, a lucky charm they could use to force victory. They carried it onto the battlefield, convinced that as long as they had the Ark, they were untouchable. But things didn't go as planned. The Philistines fought fiercely. The unthinkable happened. Israel was defeated. The Ark was captured. 30,000 soldiers were lost, and the heart of the nation was shattered. In a single day, Israel lost not just a battle, but their sense of identity and protection. For the people, it was unthinkable. How could the symbol of God's promise fall into enemy hands? How could the thing they trusted most fail them so completely? But here's the truth, a lesson that still echoes through the centuries. They had put their faith in the form, not the substance. They clung to the symbol, not the spirit. They trusted a thing, not the one who gave it meaning. Doesn't that sound familiar? How often do we, in our own lives, do the same thing? It's easy to get swept up in routines, believing that going through the motions, attending the right events, posting the right words, or owning the right things will keep us safe or guarantee success. But rituals, traditions, and symbols mean nothing if they aren't rooted in something deeper. Let me share a story. A local high school had a football team with a tradition. Every player would touch a special plaque for luck before each game. For years, they believed it brought them wins. But one season, despite the ritual, they lost game after game. It wasn't until the coach gathered the team and reminded them that their success never came from the plaque, but from their hard work, unity, and belief in one another that things started to change. Their turnaround didn't happen because of a charm. It happened because they reconnected to their true values and played with heart. The same thing happens in businesses, families, even communities. We put our trust in numbers, titles, appearances, or the way things have always been, and we forget the purpose behind them. We lose sight of honesty, compassion, courage, and faith, the real source of strength. When that happens, failure is often the wake-up call we need. For Israel, losing the Ark was a moment of heartbreak, but it also opened the door to something new. It forced them to ask, Where does our trust really lie? Who are we when the symbols and routines are stripped away? That's a question we all face at some point. Maybe you've experienced a setback, lost a job, watched a plan fall apart, or seen an unbreakable relationship shatter. Maybe you realized you were relying on something outside yourself to give you meaning. It hurts, but often it's the beginning of real growth. Because true hope isn't found in rituals, objects, or routines. It's found in what they point to: love, faith, purpose, and connection. So what can we learn from Israel's heartbreak? When life knocks us down, it's a chance to let go of empty habits and rediscover what really matters. It's a chance to build something new on a stronger foundation. As we move forward in Samuel's story, let's see how Israel learned to start again. Let's discover how loss and disappointment paved the way for a deeper, more authentic faith, a faith that couldn't be stolen or lost because it lived in their hearts, not in a box. Are you ready to see what happens when a nation and a person dares to begin again? Let's turn the page and find out together. What does it really take to change the course of a nation? Can one person's courage or a community's decision to face their mistakes actually shape a brighter future? And where do we even begin, especially when the world around us feels broken beyond repair? Let's look at Samuel's greatest legacy, not just as a prophet, but as a leader who knew how to help people start again. Picture Israel after their crushing defeat and the loss of the ark. Hope was in short supply. Trust was fractured, but in the silence that followed, a new voice began to rise. It was Samuel, calling the people to something deeper than empty rituals or shallow promises. He urged Israel to do something radical for that time: face their failures, turn away from the old idols and habits that had led them astray, and commit heart, soul, and action to something bigger and better. Samuel didn't just preach repentance, he organized the people. He brought them together in one place, helping them acknowledge their wrong turns and make a new start as a community. He called for justice, fairness, and a return to compassion. He built new altars, but more importantly, he rebuilt trust and unity. This wasn't just about saying sorry, it was about real change. The power of Samuel's leadership was rooted in humility, honesty, and a willingness to let go of pride. This is what set Samuel apart. He knew that true transformation begins with a willingness to admit when we've lost our way. And when people respond to that call with real, humble action, healing happens. It's easy to think of this as just an ancient story, but the echoes are all around us. Think about the moments in American history when bold voices called for change, not just with words, but with deep conviction. Think of Abraham Lincoln facing a divided nation, urging Americans to find the better angels of our nature, to turn away from hatred and walk toward unity. Or Martin Luther King Jr., who stood at the front lines of injustice and inspired millions to believe that love, repentance, and nonviolent action could truly change society. Neither of these leaders were perfect, but their greatest strength was their willingness to point to hope, to say, we can do better, we can start again. Real change never starts with blaming, shaming, or empty gestures. It begins with honest reflection, a willingness to face the truth, apologize, and move forward. In my own life, I've seen small communities heal after years of division, simply because someone had the courage to call a meeting, listen to hard stories, and offer a path forward. I remember one small church torn by years of disagreement where a new pastor arrived and simply asked, "What if we started by forgiving each other and building something new?" It wasn't easy, but the act of saying, "We were wrong and we want to do better," opened the door to real, lasting change. That's the Samuel approach. Call people back to their best selves. Invite them to let go of what's broken. Help them believe that even after loss, there's still hope, still purpose, still a reason to move forward. So what's the lesson here? Whether you're leading a nation, a company, a family, or just your own life, transformation begins with honesty and hope. Don't be afraid to admit where things have gone wrong. Don't let pride or fear hold you back from starting again. And always remember, the strongest leaders are those who inspire others to return to their deepest values and work together for something bigger than themselves. As we keep walking alongside Samuel, let's see how his leadership didn't just restore a broken people, it laid the foundation for a new era, full of promise. And now, with a united heart and a fresh sense of purpose, Israel is ready for a new chapter, one that will challenge their identity, their freedom, and their very understanding of what it means to be led. Let's step forward and see what happens when a people newly restored are faced with their greatest test yet. Why do we so often believe that if we just had someone better in charge, all our problems would disappear? Why do crowds chase after new leaders, sometimes just because they look impressive or sound confident, even when the cost might be more than we imagine? And how much are we willing to sacrifice for the feeling of safety, acceptance, or fitting in? Let's return to a defining moment in Israel's journey. After Samuel had spent years helping the nation heal and rediscover its values, the people came to him with a bold demand. We want a king, just like all the other nations. On the surface, it seemed harmless enough, a normal desire to be like everyone else, to have a clear leader who could fight their battles and represent them. But beneath that request was a much deeper story, a story of fear, impatience, and a growing disconnect from their own unique calling. Samuel tried to warn them. He reminded the people that God himself had always been their leader, that their strength came from trust, unity, and staying true to who they were. He cautioned that a king would bring his own demands, his own taxes, his own expectations, that with a king, they'd trade some of their freedom for the illusion of safety. But the people wouldn't listen. They looked at the surrounding nations, saw powerful rulers and armies, and didn't want to be left out. They wanted someone they could see and touch, a leader with charisma, presence, and authority. They were tired of being different. Sound familiar? In our world today, the pressure to conform, to follow the crowd, to pick leaders for their image rather than their integrity is as strong as ever. How often do we, as individuals or communities, choose what's popular over what's right? How many times do we vote, support, or follow based more on style than substance? It's tempting to believe that the next big thing, the next strong leader, or the next trend will solve all our problems. But sometimes that pursuit leads us away from our deepest values. Let me share a story. Not long ago, a local school board faced a heated election. Two candidates ran. One was well-spoken, energetic, and had all the right connections. The other was quieter, but had spent years volunteering, listening to parents, and building trust. The community, caught up in excitement and hope for something new, voted overwhelmingly for the flashy newcomer. But in the months that followed, important programs were cut, teachers' voices were ignored, and what seemed like positive change turned into a struggle for control. People soon realized they'd chosen leadership for the wrong reasons. And just like ancient Israel, they paid a price for valuing appearance over substance. This isn't just about politics. It happens in workplaces, friend groups, even families. When we let fear of missing out, of being different, of standing alone, drive our choices, we're in danger of losing what matters most. It's so easy to swap core values for short-term comfort, but as Israel learned, those decisions can come with long-term consequences. The real tragedy in the story isn't that Israel asked for a king. It's that they forgot who they were. They gave up their unique identity and their direct relationship with God, all to look like everyone else. And when Saul, tall, impressive, and charming, became king, it didn't take long for things to unravel. The lesson here is as relevant now as it was then. Leadership matters, but so do the reasons we choose our leaders. Are we picking what's easy, popular, or makes us feel safe? Or are we brave enough to value integrity, wisdom, and the courage to be different? In my own experience, the best teams, the strongest families, and the most resilient communities are led by those who stay true to their values, even when it's hard. The price of following the crowd is often paid in lost freedom, lost voice, and lost purpose. So, if you're ever tempted to go along just to fit in, or if you find yourself wishing for a king to fix everything, pause and ask, what am I trading away? What do I really believe in? Because at the end of the day, our freedom, our identity, and our future depend on the choices we make, especially when it comes to leadership. As we move forward in Samuel's story, let's see what happens when one person stands apart and how the next chapter of Israel unfolds, full of challenge, hope, and the surprising twists that come when we dare to follow a different path. What if the greatest legacy you could ever leave behind is the one the world almost never notices? What if your most important moments happen away from the spotlight? Quiet choices, small sacrifices, and steady faithfulness that echo for generations. Could it be that true greatness is often found not in a single moment of glory, but in a lifetime of humble service? As we come to the close of Samuel's journey, let's pause and look at the powerful legacy of a man who never wore a crown, never led an army, but changed the story of a nation forever. Samuel's life was anything but flashy. He didn't seek power. He never built a palace, gathered riches, or demanded honor for himself. Instead, Samuel lived out his calling faithfully year after year. He listened to God's voice, spoke hard truths, and guided his people with integrity. He invested in the next generation, training young prophets and quietly shaping the future of Israel. And perhaps most importantly, he prepared the way for David, the shepherd boy, who would one day become Israel's greatest king, a man after God's own heart. But Samuel's impact wasn't just about political change. It was about inspiring people to believe that ordinary faithfulness matters. It was about the power of quiet leadership, the kind that lifts others up even if no one remembers your name. Think about the unsung heroes in our lives, the teachers who believe in their students year after year, changing lives with gentle encouragement, the parents who work 2 jobs, show up at every game, and whisper prayers over their children at night, the coaches, mentors, and community leaders who show up early and stay late, planting seeds of kindness, courage, and hope, even when the results aren't immediate. I once met a retired elementary school teacher named Mrs. Evans. She never wrote a book or appeared on TV, but over 40 years, she taught thousands of kids to read. She remembered every name, every story, every struggle. At her retirement party, grown men and women, doctors, artists, parents, even a mayor, came back to thank her. Many said the same thing. "You changed my life. You made me believe in myself." Mrs. Evans never chased fame, but her quiet faithfulness left a legacy nothing could erase. Samuel's story reminds us that you don't need a stage to make a difference. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes the most world-changing acts are the small daily choices. Showing up, keeping your word, doing the right thing, even when it's hard. What makes a legacy truly great isn't the praise you receive, but the lives you touch, the faith you pass on, the courage you inspire, the hope you plant for someone you may never even meet. And that's a truth our world needs more than ever. In a culture obsessed with instant results, viral fame, and overnight success, it's easy to forget the beauty of a life quietly well lived. But history tells a different story. The strongest communities, the most resilient families, and the most lasting change are built by people who stay the course, love deeply, and never give up, even when nobody's watching. So as we reflect on Samuel's legacy, let's ask ourselves, what seeds are we planting? Who are we lifting up? What will endure when the spotlight moves on? Samuel's story proves that you don't have to be famous to be faithful. You don't have to be celebrated to be significant. If you live with integrity, serve with love, and leave your world a little better than you found it, you're building a legacy that matters. And as we bring Samuel's journey to a close, may we each find courage to choose the quiet path of purpose and trust that our own small faithfulness might one day shape a story far bigger than our own. Now, as we move into the final chapter, let's take all these lessons and discover how the echoes of Samuel's life can inspire us, right here, right now, to live with intention, hope, and a willingness to make a difference, one day at a time. Let's take a breath and remember what we've just traveled through. From the quiet prayers of Hannah to the powerful legacy of Samuel, we've seen how faith, courage, and humble choices can shape not only a single life, but the destiny of an entire nation. We saw that real strength isn't found in outward appearances, but in character. That true leadership is rooted in integrity, not just in charisma, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is answer a call, forgive a mistake, or quietly plant a seed for the next generation. Samuel's story isn't just ancient history, it's a guidebook for how we can live, love, and lead right now. Maybe your journey feels small, maybe your victories are quiet, but don't underestimate the power of a single act of faith or a single moment of kindness. Think about it. What voice in the night is calling you? What small act of courage could make a difference for someone else tomorrow? How will you write your own story of hope, even in uncertain times? If Samuel's journey has inspired you, imagine how your story might inspire someone else. Share this message with a friend. Leave a comment about what part of Samuel's life touched you the most, or what lesson you're carrying forward. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Your story matters. Your faith can move mountains. And together, we can build a world shaped by hope, integrity, and the quiet power of believing, one day at a time. Thank you for watching and for being part of this journey.